Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Pre-Law Shadowers. Today, we are here with a lawyer whose name is Scott, and we are very excited to talk to him. For those of you who are watching the recording after the time, thank you again for tuning in and watching this recording. We hope that you are able to learn something. And if you do have any questions for Scott, please feel free to reach out to him. We'll leave his contact information as well as everything else somewhere in the video. So, Scott, thank you very much for being here today. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to be here. We know that you are very, very busy, so we won't keep you too long.
Yeah, no problem. Glad to be here.
Um, so I'm just going to start off by asking you to tell me a little bit about your experience being in the law field, how you got there, your schooling, your process, why you ended up being a lawyer, things like that.
Sure. It's a long story. Let's see. So I always wanted to be a lawyer since I was in high school. I think it was a class in grade 10 where they had a section on law. It wasn't a total law class, but that inspired me to take law 12. And then yeah, I really enjoyed at that point, I really enjoyed kind of like figuring out what the law is, just like, having people explain to you, what's a murder, what's a battery, or, what's a tort, those kinds of things. So I thought that just those kinds of black and white kind of substantive law was interesting. And then, it kind of changed over time. So I'll get more into that later because so I went to high school, graduated, went to SFU out of high school, and then kind of took some time off, wasn't really focused. I went back to Kwantlen in 2012. So I graduated high school 2006. So, there's quite a years. I just kind of worked at restaurants and, didn't do much, to be honest, but eventually went back 2012 and went to Kwantlen. I did Bachelor of Arts in Economics and History. And so I graduated 2014, but just the way that the timing worked. So I graduated August of 2014 and I didn't get into any schools in September. A bunch of my marks were pending. Like my later year marks were better than my first little while, especially my SFU ones. I kind of had to drown those marks out. So that's what happened. And then I applied again. And then the next time I got into University of Ottawa, I got into University of Alberta. I didn't get into UBC or UVic or Thompson River. I was waitlisted at Thompson River. Part of the reason I got into U of A was because they only looked at my last 2 years, which were fantastic. But my average was lower, much lower if you took the first 2 years into account. So that's where I went. I went to University of Alberta for first year. And it was my time there was fantastic. I got very high marks in first year, much higher than I would have expected. So, my fiance at the time was back in Vancouver, so we did long distance that year. And had I known I was going to get such high marks, I would have applied to UBC and UVic. But I only applied to UVic thinking that I just didn't have a shot at UBC because it's just hard to get in there. But anyway, so I got into UVic. So that's where I finished my last 2 years. And it was in UVic and graduated there in 2018, I want to say. Yeah, 2015 to 2018. Articled at a large downtown regional firm in Vancouver called Alexander Holborn. So I think there's about 85 lawyers that work there. So they have the top couple floors of the TD Tower downtown. So it's like, I think they're like the seventh or eighth biggest in Vancouver. So it was like the OCI process. That's how I got in. Articled there, didn't get kept on. And so I went to a much smaller firm in North Burnaby. There was two other lawyers there two partners and then one associate. So I was the fourth lawyer there. Got to handle all my own files like right off the bat. So I just had a lot more responsibility, a lot more client interaction, and it kind of it was fantastic training, right? So I got kind of the raw skills from being trained at Alexander Holborn, and then I got kind of better training on how to put it into practice. Because a lot, like, I think there's, I would have had a much different experience in terms of client interaction if I stayed downtown. Now every firm's different and every lawyer's different with how much client interaction they'll have with you. But for my experience, I was running my own files pretty much out of the gate. Which was very terrifying and, but a good learning experience. So was there for a while. I was called in 2019, so September of 2019. So it's coming up on 2 years. But at the end of my first full year as a lawyer, I just started getting these this inspiration, they made me a junior partner there in October of 2020. And so part of the reason, because I was having a great year and I wanted to take over and kind of revamp everything. But just the more I thought about, they'd been practicing since 1962, was the original father, who had since retired. It's a family of lawyers, so it was father, son, and uncle. And I just had a very clear vision on how I wanted the technology to work, how I wanted the office infrastructure to work, the software we were using, and it was too much. I just figured that it would be too much to facelift everything and retrain. And so that's kind of where I went out on my own. I think probably it would have been to my advantage to stay there a couple of years and then take kind of all my clients, all my training with me. But I didn't particularly want to do that to them. I know that they're looking for somebody to take over. So that's why I left. Anyway, I opened my own firm in February of this year. So that was, was it 4 or 5 months ago?
Yeah.
And now I'm here. So I have a general solicitor's practice. So that means I kind of stay away from court. I do a lot of commercial, residential and commercial property purchases, sales, refinances. That's kind of commercial leasing too. So I do a lot of commercial leasing. I also have, I do some wills, some powers of attorney. I also do a lot of corporate work. So incorporations, startups, shareholders agreements, that kind of stuff. So it's pretty broad. I don't really, it's a little bit stressful at times doing so many different areas of law, but that's kind of the nature of the beast when you're on your own. So that's kind of in the gist how I got to be a lawyer. Now going back to your question, why I wanted to be a lawyer. So I liked this, what is the law? And then I get to law school and, you learn that it's much less about what the law is. Like you're just expected to know that, but it's much more about what kind of arguments can you make with the law. And then it became really fun. It became an intellectual challenge to, think outside the box and write memos and, a lot different than practicing law. It kind of teaches you how to think. So that was fantastic. And then I got into the practice and it was mostly at the small firm I was at, but then I got to help people go through their challenges. So for me, I'm a bit backwards. I kind of, I wanted to go in because I liked the topics. Some people went in because they wanted to help people. I kind of arrived at that conclusion later through practice. So that's kind of where, why I wanted to go the evolution, I would guess you'd call it. Yeah.
Okay, wow, thank you. That's quite the journey. I mean, a long time of school, a long time of trying to figure out where you want to be. So quite the story for you. Thank you for sharing. I just want to ask, what were some of the programs and the courses that you studied during your undergraduate degree, and why did you maybe choose some of those that you had the choice to choose?
So originally I was an English minor.
Oh, wow.
And an English major. I can't even remember. I was doing English. I forget what it was, a minor or major, but and honestly, in my experience, some of the best lawyers are English students because a lot of law is being able to write well. So that's kind of why I wanted to do that. But I got to this point where I was always on the cusp of like B+, A-, and I found that everyone was very picky with, and it was very subjective. So I figured that I just happened to be taking some electives, and one was history. And history I found was like almost like the same as English in that you write a ton of essays, but they're not so particular on different little tiny things here and there. So I feel like I got the best of both worlds, where I got to learn how to write really well, but I didn't have the, just the pickiness of English. So being able to write well for anyone who's going into thinking about going to law is like 50% of the battle. I know on exams, like some of like in my first year, my contracts exam, I ended up in A+ in that class, and they used my exam to like for students to come in and look at a model exam, which was pretty cool. But I honestly, I think that half of my mark on there was just being able to write well systematically, like how a teacher, prof wants to see the steps you go through. And like even if your law isn't totally on point, just if you can make well written arguments, it's going to serve you so well, because if you don't know how to write, you're going to be in trouble.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure.
mm-hmm.
Wow, that's great to know. I mean, like when I hear about people who go into law or who go to law school, it's typically, kids who are taking poli-sci or criminology, even psych, things that are very kind of more of the social science aspect. So it's really great to hear somebody come from a different perspective and be able to be so successful. So that's great. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
What was the law school admission process like in your taking the LSAT and that whole thing? What was that like for you?
Yeah, the LSAT, that word just doesn't sit well with me. So I wrote the LSAT 3 times or 4 times. I can't remember. I think it was 3. And if I remember correctly, I think my first mark was 149. I think my second mark was 152, and I think my final mark was 155. And I took courses, like I took 2 courses on it. I think one was called Power Score, and I think the other one was called Kaplan, but I can't remember. It was a long time ago. So I didn't do well at all on the LSAT. Like my score is lower than a lot of the averages at even the worst schools in Canada. Not the worst, like there isn't really a bad school in Canada, but even the bottom school, whatever you want to call it. And so like and it felt kind of cool to go in and get such high marks in first year, because I think one of the skills I had was that I write well, and that I work really, really hard. A lot of people that I didn't even know in first year. Unfortunately, I had this reputation for being one of the hardest working students, on like people that just didn't even know me knew this about me. So then, there's worse things to be known for. But I would say in my first year, there was a time where I was studying. I would wake up at like 5 a.m, and basically till 9 p.m. I'd be studying, with breaks for school and eating and going to the gym, but that's pretty much all I did. And it worked for me, because the way that I saw it, I figured that law firms downtown would be making a decision on you with only your first year marks. You go through first year, OCIs are the second month of year 2 or something like that, and that you're going to have a decision made on you with only first year marks. And most big firms come with guaranteed articling. So if you could get those high first year marks, you're basically golden. So I made the decision that I would sacrifice a ton of my time to getting there, and it worked out for me. But yeah.
Wow, yeah. I mean, that's great to hear. It's great to know that, like, if you do put in the work, if you do put in that time, and being able to know that you can take the time to dedicate yourself to something, and it does pay off in the long run. So that's really motivating to hear. And I think that's great advice to law students now who are struggling, who just feel like they don't really want to try that hard sometimes because it's just so overwhelming. There's so much to do, but it's great to know that it does pay off in the long run if you do work hard enough.
Yeah, and so don't give up if the LSAT's tough. Like even like English is my first language. I couldn't imagine having to write it if it was not my first language.
Wow.
So LSAT aside, the rest of it is just get good GPA, trying to get good relationships with your profs, because like letters of reference there help. I even had a couple, at least one prof edit my personal statement, which helped quite a lot. So if you have a prof, that's good at writing too, they can take a look at, if they're willing to, but depends on what school you're at. Some schools, the profs are just too darn busy, but Kwantlen, it's a university, but it's not UBC. So a lot of the people there weren't taking advantage of the same office hours. So they were able to, that prof was happy to look at that for me. And then the rest is just volunteer, and that's basically it. It's LSAT, GPA, volunteer, personal statement, letters of reference. That's all.
Right. So I know that you are specified in a wide range of real estate planning, business matters, things like that. And I know that you started off as an English major or minor. So how did you end up getting into the business type of law?
Well, I was in English, but I finished with economics and history. So
Okay.
I had a little bit of a understanding of kind of how the economy works. I mean, I should have quite an in-depth with a minor, but it's not that applicable in terms of my day-to-day practice. It just kind of has a bit of a underlying background on commercial transactions and the economy in general. But I kind of flip-flopped going back and forth between litigation and solicitor work. That's, you're going to hear this often, but that's kind of how law is divided. You have litigators and solicitors, which are basically non-litigators. It's paperwork stuff. And I think one of the things that came to me was that, in my, I did well in my moot, and I think my ability to construct the arguments on paper was superior to my conveying them. I did get high mark in that class, but I just don't think it came naturally to me. I thought that if I was toe to toe against someone and we all else equal, if it came naturally to them, I'd always be at a bit of a disadvantage. So not only that, it's just I'm a perfectionist, and I feel like I would never stop getting ready for trial or any cross examinations, or I would just always be thinking of the facts and making now some people on the other hand say that same thing about documents, like they would always be going through the documents, but I don't have that problem. When documents are done for me, I kind of know when to pull the pin on it.
Right.
So yeah, eventually that's just kind of what steered me away. And another thing is that there's a bunch of pros and cons, but generally one thing that I don't need to worry about is chasing clients for money. On commercial transactions, the money comes into my account and I will have already accounted for what I need to pay myself before anyone gets paid.
Oh.
So that's kind of handy. It's like when you're doing hourly work and you have to think about retainers, and some of the work I do I do without a retainer, or I do get a retainer and then it runs out, but it's not common. I would say 50 to 70% of what I do is money from trust that I've just accounted for.
Wow. Yeah, that's really interesting, because I mean, I've been taught there's, for the most part, that there's kind of one type of legal work that you can do, and it's like the advocation of people and being able to retain them and having to kind of, I guess, chase down your money in a sense at the when you're done the whole process of being with the client. So that's a very interesting perspective, and I think that might change a lot of people's perspective on what exactly they want to do when they are done with law school and how they want to go about their practice. So that's a really interesting perspective, because I did not know that, honestly speaking. So
yeah, so for example, I have a file closing today. It's a purchase, and once I get the mortgage instructions and it tells me how much money I get,
right.
I have to adjust for other things like property tax, and let's say my client's buying a piece of a condo, you got to adjust for some things, for example, if there's a year worth of property tax, but let's say it's payable in a month. Technically my client should be reimbursed because they didn't own the property for those first 4 months. The seller should pay that portion of the property tax. So little things like that get adjusted for. And then I also add my account. And then that gets to the bottom, and then it has a number there that the client has to bring in to complete the transaction. And I need that in advance of the closing. So on closing day, you cut all the checks, you pay the seller, you pay the realtor commissions, I pay myself. So I really don't need to worry about that kind of chasing the client for that.
Yeah. Wow. That's a really interesting perspective. That's great to hear. I mean, I did not know that at all. I thought it was kind of like the one type of practice. So it's cool to be able to hear that there's many, many different types of work that you could do if you aren't interested in kind of being like, going to court and doing that type of law. So that's great to hear. What are your day-to-day responsibilities like in your field? What do you do the most? What do you typically do?
So, because I run my own business, like I wear two hats, right? I'm the practitioner where I need to do the technical work, but I'm also the business owner. So I need to worry about things like paying GST, paying PSD, paying my payroll remittances, writing blog posts, keeping track of the website, marketing. Like, so there's a lot of different stuff on the business side that I do. And I'm always switching hats. Like I'm always like, oh, I got to take care of that. I've got to take care of that. In terms of day to day, so like we were talking about, my assistant, I have a new assistant starting next week. My old assistant, her last day was yesterday. So today and the rest of the week, I'm going to be doing a lot of like administrative stuff. That's closing today. I'm going to be, so I'm going to register the transfer pretty quick. As soon as I get confirmation the mortgage proceeds are in, I need to do up letters. So I need to do a letter to the seller saying, here's your money. It was registered on this day, and here I'm going to make reference to the undertakings that we exchanged in the document exchange prior. I'm going to do a completion letter to the seller. I got to write a check and pay title insurance. I maybe got to pay the insurance binder. I forget. Every file is kind of different, but it's a lot of letters and checks, and then I got to send them all out. But normally my assistant does that. So generally in the day to day, I answer a lot of emails. Like this past weekend, I made 3 companies. So I did up all the documents to make these 3 companies. One of the software solutions I like is my electronic signing software. So I can send it for electronic signature, which is super, super handy.
Yeah.
You can't do that with all land titles documents, but so I was doing that on the day-to-day basis, making these companies. Got to order some more binders for the corporate books. I actually there's a stack I got to put in a binder. Everything's printed. I just can't put it in a binder. But so that's kind of, it's really dependent on just what files I have. Like if I look at, let's see if I see what I have to do on a day-to-day for today. I got to order printer paper. I got some share certificates that are ready for signature from a client. I have to do a master services agreement for a corporate client. There's a bunch of real estate that I have upcoming that I need to take a look at, some purchase and sales. So it just depends on what kind of files that have come through the door. Right.
Wow, that's a lot. I mean, it's so hard to balance. I can't even imagine being able to keep track of like actually practicing, and then all of like the printer paper things, for example, like these little things that that you wouldn't think twice about,
Right. Yeah.
But being a business owner, I mean, it's a whole other world.
Yeah, I'd never owned a business before. So, it was a big learning curve for me there's a lot of stuff to know. Like it's going pretty smoothly now, but February when I opened, and I was half putting together all this furniture and getting my trust account set up and just, there's a lot of stuff that I did that little month there that I had no idea before that I had to do. Business license, nonstop stuff.
Yeah. Can I just ask, like, why did you end up wanting to start your own business? What was the reasoning that was behind it?
Well, there's a couple reasons, right? So, one of the big reasons that we talked about is that like I just had this clear image on how I wanted the files to run, the systems to run. At the old firm, they were printing emails and putting them in paper folders still. There was no centralized file storage system, so I couldn't see anyone else's files, which was very different from downtown in the big firm I was at. We had our own IT department. I
Yeah.
could send an email to star help and somebody would appear and fix my problems.
Yeah.
We had a library, we had bussers like that would
Wow.
like do drinks and stuff. So, anyway, totally different. So I just had this, system in my head, and I actually had designed it to implement it there. It's just, I figured I just would be better served going on my own.
Right.
That's pretty much what started it. That I just wanted to do the system. I didn't want to train anyone. I didn't want to have any approval. I didn't want to meet any resistance. That's kind of where I landed at.
Yeah. Did you have any doubts kind of going into that? Like within yourself, was there kind of like a red flag to you and you just kept going, or?
It's nerve-wracking, right? So like,
Yeah.
I had a good year in my first year as a lawyer, just in terms of the dollar amount of work that I had not so much brought in. So I did bring in a lot of it. More than half of it was more my own clients that I went and got. But so it's one thing to have everyone ready to go, all the staff ready, all the rent paid for, and then do that, than it is to go out and see if you can do the same thing. So yeah, it was pretty nerve-wracking. I had a number that I wanted to get to in my head in terms of monthly revenue that would make me pretty happy. I mean, it was my first goal, right? Obviously,
Right.
that's just where I wanted to get to at first.
Mhm.
And I surpassed that in April. So, February, March, April. So it was my third. So from February, like I was half operating. I didn't do that much, but March, I doubled that. And then April, I almost doubled. No, not quite double, 50% over, like 1.5 times or something like that. So, it's going pretty good so far. But I didn't have any like crippling fears about it. It's just nerve-wracking, right? You never started your own business. It's a lot to take on. So like I had maybe $15,000 or $20,000 of startup costs, like this desk. I had this office painted. Just a lot of furniture, like a boardroom table, 8 chairs, the printer behind me. There's a lot of startup costs, but I've already paid those back. So it's worked pretty well. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's great to hear. I mean, like that's because I hear a lot of kind of like horror stories almost about people and their businesses and just how much, like how hard it was and how they struggled so much. So it's great to know that, yes, those things can happen, but also, if you do work hard enough, if you do kind of set yourself up in a certain way, you will be able to be comfortable at least throughout time. So that's great to hear.
All right.
So I will kind of start to wrap things up. I know you're a little bit busy, so I will keep it to maybe another 10 to 15 or so.
Sure.
What is one of the most common misconceptions that you hear about being a lawyer in your field?
Misconceptions. I don't know if it's just a misconception, but I think that the job is a lot different than law school. I think everybody says that. It's really fun to think like a lawyer, be trained like a lawyer, learn cases. Some of them are interesting. It's a lot different. It's much more of a intellectual exercise than it is a client is here with a problem or with an issue, or they need a transaction, like they need to do they're buying something or something like that, right? That's, I think, the big misconception is that it's just not the same. So it's a lot more detail oriented, over at least in my practice and solicitor work. So I can't speak that much to litigation, but it's a lot more about making sure documents are right, spending a lot of time. It's not, you don't do that much research unless somebody asks you for your opinion on something, and you have to sit down and weigh the law out. But that's it just takes adjusting to, right? Like you're no matter where you are, you're going to be like operating a little mini business, right? So even if you're an associate somewhere, you're going to be expected to go out and kind of make a name for yourself, at least if you want to advance in the organization. So just in terms, so the type of work I think is people don't quite understand, like the things you do on a day-to-day basis, and then kind of the atmosphere of your little mini business. Even if you're not an owner, you have to, make your name for, John Smith lawyer. It's not so much that you're just taking all the work from the firm, but you should go out and kind of market for yourself too.
Yeah, that's great. That's great to hear. I think a lot of people don't really know sometimes, like for me, just as a student, like I kind of, not that I think it's going to be easy or it's just going to kind of come to me, but yeah, like I have no idea what it's going to be like. I mean, times are changing, things are so different, things change within a few minutes, right? So that's great to hear just from your perspective. That's great. Thank you for that. What's some advice that you would give to your younger self prior to attending law school?
Hmm.
Kind of a hard one.
Yeah. Try to enjoy it more. That's kind of what I would take. It's easy to be in stress mode and studying all the time, which is what I did. But it's quite a ride. So like, I would advise myself to kind of just slow down and just try to take it in a bit more. Just appreciate it for what it is, because it's pretty soon it's gone, and then you're just stuck in answering emails all day. Yeah.
Wow, that's good advice. Thank you. And my last question for you before we wrap things up is, what's some advice that you would give to the future generation of aspiring legal professionals?
Hmm. I would say that they don't really tell you this, but a lot, like at least for myself, like I've always like had a bit of like imposter syndrome. So like, especially when you get to law school, you're here with all these like fantastic A+ people, and they're very impressive, and you kind of doubt yourself. So maybe I think that kind of fueled a lot of my studying. I studied a lot just because I wanted to make sure that I belonged and that I excelled, and which was great. But I think a lot of lawyers suffer from imposter syndrome, in the sense that like they kind of think that maybe they're not like oh, they shouldn't be doing this, maybe they don't know, maybe I don't know what I'm doing, or just these kinds of thoughts, like
Right.
everybody's kind of in the same boat. Nobody is totally confident like that. So I would say expect that. So expect to feel like that you're a bit of an imposter, but you're not. You can do the work. You can do the you can do the exams. It's just know that a lot of people feel like that. Maybe not everyone, but that it's normal, and that you shouldn't listen to that voice.
That's
Yeah.
great advice. I mean, I think for students, especially now, like I can speak for myself, but I mean, it's such a mentally exhausting thing sometimes. Not knowing if you're gonna be successful in your field and spending all this time and all of this energy into trying your hardest. So, like it's so hard, I think, for so many kids, and a lot of people don't like to talk about it because they want to kind of be this tough person and say that they are successful and that they made it and things like that. But, we're all human and we do all experience those emotions of just the overwhelmingness and the doubt within yourself. So that's great advice. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
So I know you're busy, so I won't keep you much longer.
Sure.
Thank you for taking your time out of your day, your very busy day, to talk to us and to talk to the future generation of legal professionals. I'm not sure if you want to say your contact information for those who might be interested or who want to reach out to you, if you have a few time for questions and emails and things like that.
Sure. Yeah. It's I don't know. Do you want me to write it down or tell it to you? What?
You can say it because during like the recordings on YouTube, they don't show the chat or anything.
Sure.
So you can just say it and then.
Yeah. So it's I'll give you my email. So my email is S as in Sam .McInnes, my last name, McInnes mlglaw.ca.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for that. Thank you again for taking the time. Thank you for joining Pre-Law Shadowers and taking this time to educate my generation of students. It's great. It's great to know that we are so accepted and that there are so many people who do want to speak to us and help us throughout this journey. So thank you once again.
Yeah, no problem.
If you have any questions, please reach out to us. If you need something, please reach out to us as well. So yeah, thank you once again.
No problem.
Okay, so I will